Hello again, friends. And for those of you who have been over on Spreaker, Spotify, what have you, on the audio only version of the episode, again, I'm Bill Culhane here on the Big Bit Theory. We do have crazy bits coming up momentarily, so I encourage you to stand by for that. And as you know, I just previewed on the audio version. We're going to focus on new friends, talk about digital navigation, water in the US, and one of our most favorite cities in the US, a city out west. We'll be talking about that as well. Standing by as our guest, Elizabeth Dunning, over on the audio side. I spoke briefly about Elizabeth's background. You can check out her bio in the description of the episode. Let's see. Elizabeth got involved with government back in 2008, working for the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee in the Oversights and Investigations Committee. Funny enough, I'll be in DC this upcoming week. From there, she earned a degree in environmental engineering from New Mexico Institute of Technology. Go Miners. While she lived in New Mexico, she served as the representative from New Mexico for RMWEA and co-chaired their Government Affairs Committee. 4 years ago, Elizabeth moved to Denver and got involved with AmeriCorps after learning about the digital navigation program. More on that in a moment. So, drum roll with no further ado. Joining us is one of my new friends, Elizabeth Dunning. Elizabeth, thank you so much for visiting with us here on the Big Bit Theory.
A pleasure, Bill.
Yes, so let's start here. I'm going to have you brag on your new home, Denver, Colorado. Take everybody behind the curtain. You and I met. You and I were each there in Denver at AWWA, which is the American Waterworks Association. They had their ACE 2025 there at the Colorado Convention Center. You and I were fortunate enough to cross paths. As I mentioned to you, as we did some prep for this conversation, I, along with thousands of other people, are going to be in Denver the end of July for NIGP Forum there at the Colorado Convention Center. So, Elizabeth, I'm going to turn it over to you. Brag about your city. What will people be excited about, or should they be excited about? Anything that maybe people will find surprising about Denver. You take it away.
So, Denver is really a cultural hub for the United States. You can find a lot of different people that care about various aspects of everything from the environment to helping people with immigration to dealing with people who are struggling with domestic violence, on over to people that struggle with addictions. It's a great place to find your feet if you're just restarting in life.
Yeah, I'm a fan of Denver. I think I even mentioned to you there at the Colorado Convention Center. I've been to Denver over the years, not going to age myself. I've been to Denver 8, 9, 10 times or so. And each time I come away really impressed with the city of Denver. For those of you attending NIGP Forum, and actually we're going to have an episode about the upcoming forum, we're going to get that done before we all leave for Denver. But what they've done on 16th Street, which is right near the convention center. Elizabeth, I went down there and I was like, man, this is a happening place that is still growing.
Yeah, they did a lot of work both on the water side. They actually updated that entire pipeline. And then they've also, for transportation, there's a free mall ride that runs from there to Union Station. So it's easy to shop and so forth. And you can find shops for everything in that area. It's a very cool place to be.
Yeah, no doubt. And you just mentioned water a second ago, Elizabeth, in the business. That's what we call a great segue. So you and I have established that we met in Denver, what was it, 4 or 5 days there at AWWA. And so give your overall opinions about that conference. What were some things that you found interesting other than meeting myself, Nicholas, and the Beacon folks? But did you go to any presentations that really resonated with you? What were your takeaways?
Went to a couple of presentations. The two that I found the most interesting were utilizing AI within the water treatment world to do your lower level decision making, such as when to kick on pumps or when to start changing the pH, and then that versus your digital security that we're running into for your operations technology as well as for your information technology.
Yeah, there are a lot of, of course, you mentioned AI, and there's not an, I was going to say, not a day that goes by, not an hour that goes by in my world where I don't come across something where, AI is now a part of the technology, the conversation, the industry. So interesting that AI, of course, is also found in the water world. And speaking of water, in terms of hot button topics, here on the show, everybody, our longtime listeners know, I should say, in our 11th season, we've had many, many episodes, many, many conversations with people across a number of industries to include water. And so, what are your opinions, your thoughts when the conversation comes up? And by the way, I saw that you're a highly motivated environmental engineer. So you're qualified, right, to reply to this. But in terms of where water is right now in this country, infrastructure, whatever aspect really, hits home with you, Elizabeth, what can you share with our viewers, with our listeners?
Well, one of my major concerns about water is a lot of the infrastructure is aging. People don't realize just how important that is. So you start hitting rural communities and their water treatment facilities are outdated. They don't have the money to start bringing them into compliance with new water treatment techniques and water regulations. And then additionally, like they don't have the money to hire somebody to do things like write grants for that. And then they may not have the population around there to train, like that could be trained on those water treatment techniques. They can be really, really complicated. You also see issues with like Sackett versus the EPA, where you're having people that are on the Supreme Court make decisions about how water law should be interpreted that have, in my opinion, very little understanding of how water flows and will react, like two different things. And you're dealing with different states that have different degrees of treatment that they'll put water to before they discharge. Like Colorado, New Mexico, and Texas all share the Colorado River and the Rio Grande, but all three of them have very different discharge standards for what can go into the Rio Grande.
Yeah, and being here in Texas, as you know, in Austin, water certainly, and especially as we arrive into the summer months, water is certainly a part of the conversation here. When I arrived in Austin back in the early 90s, after I left the University of South Alabama, working there and came here, uh, Austin was just a small town kind of vibey place, and now it's a major metropolitan area ever growing. Anybody who's been around Austin off and on, not unlike Denver, you've seen these cities expand. Well, you have more people, you have more industry, you have more needs when it comes to water, but rivers and lakes and all these other things aren't magically appearing. So, yeah, I, I see it here, Elizabeth, in Austin.
Yeah, and places like Albuquerque did a bunch of surveying back in the early 90s, and they're like, yeah, there's like a huge underground lake here, is what they advertised to try and get people to move there. Well, the problem is salinity content as you went down increased to the point where it wasn't treatable to where you could drink it. Like it's too salty. And then as they depleted the freshwater sources, then it caused settling issues within the structure for buildings.
Yeah. So
It's just,
Uh,
yeah.
to Elizabeth's point about infrastructure, of course, we had Darren Olson from the American Society of Civil Engineers on our previous episode, and U.S. infrastructure is getting better, but there are still many, many miles worth of improvement in infrastructure that we all need to concentrate and focus on. So, water, I promise everybody, Elizabeth, I promise you as well, it'll be a topic that we will bring up again and explore even in more depth as the episodes and seasons go along. No doubt about that. So let's transition a little bit. So, Elizabeth, when you and I met there in Denver a couple of weeks ago, found out that you are currently working with AmeriCorps. And so I thought to myself, well, and we were in an exhibit hall. I thought, how many people here in this exhibit hall in Denver, Colorado, downtown Denver, know what AmeriCorps is, know how it started, kind of know the story behind the organization? So, what can you share with our listeners, with our viewers who may not be exactly aware of what AmeriCorps, what the story is?
AmeriCorps is sort of like Peace Corps, but for the United States. So it's kind of a misnomer, if you will. It is not all of America. It is just the United States, but it was officially started by President Clinton in 94, but there were several organizations prior to that that got merged by his bill. And what we do is a lot of focus on community building. So, one of my supervisors was one of the first people on the ground after Hurricane Katrina, handing out water bottles and food and trying to make sure that people had shelter and so forth and a way to get out and to safety. I know that other people who have served have gone on to do things like the Boys and Girls Club. There are people that are in AmeriCorps that end up doing a lot of work with your parks and your rec. It expands to so many different areas. Almost any field you could go into AmeriCorps and find a place that you could help. And that's just the general idea is to help.
Very nice. A noble mission indeed. So thank you, Elizabeth, for sharing the background there on AmeriCorps. So let's transition to specifically what you're doing. You kind of explained it to us there in Denver, but if you would, digital navigation, that program, what are your efforts specifically focused on?
So, my job description is to take anybody that is lacking computer skills or struggles with various aspects of things like internet safety or applying for jobs or getting like food stamps and Medicaid assistance to help them with that. But I kind of expanded it a little bit beyond that because what I ran into is people that have lost access to the digital world generally have something else going on. They were justice involved. They experienced domestic violence. They wound up being unhoused. They wound up struggling with addiction, just a ton of other things. And so I also started including access to food, housing options, different jobs that would take people that had a criminal background of some sort. And I just started including what else is going on in your life? What else can I help with so that this part is easier for you to focus on while you're learning?
Very good. And as I said there in Denver, and anybody who has followed the show, anybody who knows me understands because part of my life has been dedicated to service, helping others. But a tip of the cap to you, much applause to you, Elizabeth, and everybody there who is willing to help their fellow person. So important. I think that need grows more and more where we're taking care, helping our neighbors. If anybody wants more information, Elizabeth, about AmeriCorps, about the program you're involved in, what are some resources that people can refer to?
So you can always go to the AmeriCorps website, and then we are specifically funded through a grant from the Learning Source, and they're also an excellent option to get help from. But if you are struggling with anything, my first my first suggestion to anybody struggling is to go find a library. Librarians are the key to getting your community to a place that's safe. Like they know where the food is in the area, they'll provide you free internet, there's computers you can use to go to the library if you're struggling.
Good suggestions there, Elizabeth. And in terms of the references that Elizabeth just passed along, if you go to the description of the episode, Lauren, Chrissy, Rick, they'll put the links in there. So again, a lot of, as Elizabeth just explained, a lot of really good information there. So Elizabeth, on behalf of our team here, on behalf of our audience, again, thank you so much for carving some time out with us today and sharing your story.
Of course, thank you for the opportunity to help people.